this episode of Ask Sympraxis. Our team, as always, kind of represents a broad array of viewpoints and roles on here. So I think we can tackle this image or this issue from a lot of different angles. And the issue today is modernizing SharePoint. Modernizing is an enormous category to talk about, but we'll start with defining what we mean about it. Then we'll do our breakdown by role, because different members of our team have different points of view on this, because we have different roles on the projects that we work on. We'll leave you with a couple of things, a list of things to start doing and stop doing in conjunction with modernization, and of course some resources that you can take away and look at your own convenience. So Mark, I'm gonna flip it to you for framing. I just put the couple of slides in here about classic versus modern, just to frame it and make sure we're all on the same page.
This Mark?
Or this one.
We do have many marks to choose
you and
from.
your builds, Mark.
Yeah. Well, classic versus modern is it is what you're showing on the screen. There's a UI that's a classic UI and a modern UI. They are sort of representative of SharePoint 2013, 2016 on the left, and SharePoint 2019 and SharePoint Online on the right. And it's an evolution of the user interface, but it's also a lot of other things under the covers. So things like site topology and using modern search or Microsoft Search versus SharePoint Search. So that, like you said right up front, there's a lot of different stuff we can talk about here. But to most end users, the thing that you have on the screen is what they think of as the difference between classic and modern.
So Mark, we've adopted some of what, well, this is from your presentation, but your presentation was based in part on what Bob German presented.
I stole that from Bob, yes.
Shamelessly, right? Good artists borrow, great artists steal.
That's right, that's right.
So these are some of those reasons that you were talking about, and I just bounced in reason number 11.
Yeah, that slide is a great way to talk through what the difference between classic and modern is. It's a little long in the tooth. Bob, you wrote that blog post a couple of years ago, I think, and then I stole it. And there's
true. It's been around.
I think, yeah. I mean, I think that the probably the biggest thing that isn't on this slide is Microsoft is spending zero money on classic unless there's a serious problem with something. All of their investment is in modern. That is the product now, not what the classic UI, not the classic sort of ways you go about doing things. And we're seeing even some of the, like site owner sort of backstage pages are starting to convert to a modern experience. So at some point in the relatively near future, I expect, though there is no date, I'm not trying to scare anybody, that classic as a thing will start to disappear altogether.
There's carrots and sticks.
Yes,
right?
There's no stick at the moment.
Right. So when we prepped for this, when we kind of sat down earlier in the week and we thought about the topics by role, right? We chunked it out into three main roles, and I think this is the part where I would really like to defer, because each of these roles we could do an hour on. Some of these topics within the roles we could do an hour on. So I'd like to ask the folks who've joined us this week, what do you care about the most in terms of modernization, and where would you like to focus our effort? We keep this very concentrated into a half an hour, and we keep it very client driven. So your input on this will kind of direct us to, you'll kind of write your own story.
It's like one of those make your own ending books. When
Choose
you were
your
a
own
kid.
ending. That's right.
Yeah, I love those. I did love those.
Is there a dragon in IT Pro? Because if there is, I want to do that one.
Always dragons.
There's always dragons in
There'd be dragons in Iowa.
Does anybody have an opinion?
If not, we're going to let Mark pick.
I have an opinion, but not about dragons. Well, I do have an opinion about dragons. They're wonderful. Yeah, so one of the things that sort of comes to mind in where we are with our project right now is the migration from old SharePoint 2010 sites into the modern universe. And a number of the sites that we have had tons of wiki pages. And of course, we migrated, and they are classic pages within a modern site, which means that the navigation on the left side is a different experience depending on which type of page you're on. So short of telling owners to rebuild these pages through some elevated form of copy and paste, is there an easy button?
Todd, that's you, man.
That is, yes. So I wouldn't call it an easy button. I would call it an easier button, probably. Yeah, so one of the things that we've got in there under IT Pro is pages. So page modernization. And there's a couple of ways to do it. I've chosen to do it the hard way. So the story that I'm going to tell you is probably the worst case scenario. But there is a PowerShell commandlet in the PNP that will convert that classic page to a modern page for you. And there's a lot of switches you can flip, and there's XML files and all that. But that is the way that you do it. And so for one of our customers, I've got it written down somewhere, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of pages for them, probably, with this PowerShell commandlet. So I wrote some PowerShell that would take a source, pages directory, loop through all of them, spit out modern pages on the other end, and fix all the navigation, all the stuff that you talked about. After I get done talking, I can go, or somebody else on the team can go. There are a couple of different projects with the PNP that will deal with that. And one of them has a nice UI that's in the page so that you don't have to mess with PowerShell. You can just go in and say, modernize this page, and it will spit that out. But by all means, if you want some more hand-holding on that, reach out to me, and I'm happy to show you what I've done and all that.
Great. We did get some, I don't know, Mike, if you saw, but there's some things in the chat. There's some requests to talk about search experience and IA and governance.
You have a 3-year-old.
I'm very sophisticated with my
I'm
use
see
of
grape jelly smeared across the screen here.
That is some kind of highlighting right there.
Let's do we want to touch on search a little bit first? Derek, I know you've spent some time on this from the dev side with the PNP search web parts, and maybe you want to get us started there.
Sure. Well, so I guess the one thing that you'll notice, and this should be out and about, is the search bar has moved now, and we're all directing everything to the Microsoft search at this point. And the out of the box sort of search is kind of lacking in my humble opinion. The fact that one of the drawbacks is not having the people organized, the people scope at the lower site level and stuff like that. What I've been spending a lot more time doing is leveraging the PNP modern search refiner web part. And Mike, is that link in the resources at the end?
There's a link to the page modernization components in PNP, but I can add the search one too if we want.
I can find it.
We can add that.
Oh, okay. Put it in the chat.
Put it in the chat. And so what this does is this is a web part. It lets you add search components to basically any page you want, and you can use it as either a standard standalone search results page, like you would in the old Search Center kind of days. Or it lets you actually use it as more of a very highly filterable highlighted content web part. And you can customize the UI, you can customize the fields, you can get refiners that you can add to it, all things that are sort of limited in the out-of-the-box experience. So as that relates to sort of modernization, I think there's a new, I guess Microsoft is pushing the new, Julie, is the new search headerless template live yet?
I don't know. Off the top of my head. I can find out, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah. So there's a new template that was announced at Ignite I don't know whether it's live or not, but it's basically a headerless template. So you don't have to have your hub site navigation on it. It has the sweet bar, and pretty much that's it. And so you can use that and then connect the search web parts to the PNP search web parts on a page like that. And then you can actually, in the same rollout with that template, was also the ability to set a custom search center URL, like you used to be able to do in the old days. So if what you're seeing in the new Microsoft search doesn't sort of land where you want, you can definitely use the PNP component to further customize that and get a much more rich experience, similar to what we had in the old 2013 search experience.
Has anyone seen, in terms of a modern search experience, has anyone seen the new Microsoft search or Bing for Business in the wild, being used in production environments? And if so, what's the compelling story there?
Well, we use it. We have it turned on. I don't know if you've all been noticing that we're sort of using it actively, but I use it when I'm searching. So, you essentially wire up from central admin. You wire up from the admin center and say you want Bing search integration, and then when you use Bing as your default search engine, you see results not only from the internet at large, but you also see results from inside your organization. So for instance, if I search for Emily, not only would I find the fact that she's speaking at SPS Omaha coming up, I would also see her profile within Sympraxis. So I could, get her phone number and say, hey, Emily, what are you going to talk about at Omaha? So it's an integrated search experience that, to be honest, scares people a little bit, because you see search results from inside your Office or your Microsoft 365 tenant in a Bing results page, but it's segregated, it's separated at the top of the page, and you can expand and collapse it if you realize it's not where your result is likely to lie. But it's a pretty powerful thing, and the other part of that's powerful, of course, is that on the back end, the analytics that come along with that help the organization to understand what people are searching for, not personally, not like we're searching for Whole Foods or something, but what links you end up clicking on in those Bing search results that take you back into your organization for a successful hit. It's pretty cool. I wanted to make one other comment about search, and then I'll stop talking. I'm not sure a lot of people are fully aware of the fact that the SharePoint search didn't just get rebranded as Microsoft Search. It's an entirely different animal. It's, if you think about SharePoint search as something that searched just within the SharePoint content corpus, Microsoft 365 search really sits at a higher level, and it's searching across all of the apps and services that it can consume and provide results back from. So you'll see the result types expand over time. So for instance, right now you can see SharePoint content and planner tasks, I believe, and Yammer threads, and I'm not sure, I'll make stuff up that's not true, but you'll see more of those object types show up over time. So it's not just a rebranding, it's a really different way of thinking about search.
Cool. Thanks for kind of diving in on that. I can't see the the chat because I'm kind of in presenter mode here. So if other people want to just make sure, A, we're answering questions to folks' satisfaction, or B, if we've missed something and need a redirect, just verbally grab me and point me in the right direction.
Yeah,
okay?
I'm working in the chat,
Awesome.
so I've been answering things too. But the other sort of focus was on IA and governance. Two different people would like to focus on
would
that.
love to hear about that. And I think let's refine that a bit, right? Because IA and governance can be very big and very broad. Let's refine that a little bit to drill into which of these subtopics under IA and governance is of particular interest, I think.
Yeah, they were general comments, so I don't see a specific ask.
Okay.
We can do one
Hubification.
Oh, great. And I have the perfect link to share with you. And it's actually a nice bridge from the search as well. So one of the big differences with your site architecture and hierarchies moving to modern is that you're now having all separate site collections that are standalone, and you're not using subsites anymore. To create those hierarchies where you might have one department or group with sub-functions, instead you're doing what's called hubification. And I'll drop an article into the chat about planning your hub navigation by Sue Hanley, which is very, very helpful. A couple things to think about with that hubification is what it includes. So you get things like a persistent navigation. You can roll up news, and then that also impacts your search, because if you're searching from a hub site, it will search that entire scope of all of the associated sites. One thing that you have a limitation of right now is that a hub site cannot belong to another hub site, though that was something announced at Ignite, that they're going to have associated hubs coming in the future. So just be aware that right now you can have one tier in that relationship. A lot of what you're using to create those site hierarchies in modern is the links and the site navigation, and in some cases, custom global navigation.
Emily, is there ever a drawback? I think we may have seen this at a client where the hub navigation on sites with particularly busy site navigation can get real busy. It can get really kind of messy and complicated. Any thoughts on that or guidance on that?
Definitely. And I'll send some more articles into the chat from Nielsen Norman Group as well. But when you're thinking about what you're prioritizing into your navigation, one of the user experience principles you want to consider is the Hick-Hyman law, where it will take more time to make a decision with the more content that's available. So when you're thinking about what to put into your navigation, one of your first considerations want to be, is this something that you are going to need to be accessing from everywhere? So let's just do a site as an example, and then the site pages. Every single page within that site, you may not need to be hopping in between. So you don't need to surface every single page in that top navigation. You really want to focus on the outcome objectives that you're creating for the site of what do people need to most commonly do, and then have your site navigation reflect that as well.
Cool, thank you. Anything else on the IA and governance side while we were talking? Was anything new rolling in there, Julie?
Sort of. So Mark Christman asked a question about things like, so I was mentioning the page modernization and stuff like that. And he said one of the things that concerns him is when business users grab those solutions, drop them into a team site, and it answers all of the problems that they have. And then it ends up being a mission critical resource. We've seen that happen a million times, but then ends up breaking upgrade or things like that. And the internet solution isn't supported anymore. And what happens? How do we handle all of that? That's a very real thing. I think I can say 2 words, Fab 40, and bring back lots of nightmares for people where that exact thing was just destroyed farms. Julie already mentioned it in the chat, but I kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit. The structure of SharePoint has changed a lot since then, and that is less likely to be a problem now because a lot of things run client side, not server side, and there's a much bigger decoupling between the content and the functionality, so it's easier to unbolt some of those things. Not always as easy as we'd like, but I worry about it a lot less now than I did 10 years ago.
I think the other point there is that the PNP stuff and Fab 40 is just let's not talk about that anymore. But the PNP stuff, Julie and I are both on that team, and we spend a lot of time with the folks who do work there, and that's very much in concert with Microsoft. So like those modern search web parts were built, and this was all in the chat, were built partially by Michael Svensson and several other, Frank Cornu and a couple other people who've spent a lot of time on them. But it's all sort of under the auspices of Microsoft. It's with full conversation with Microsoft and trying to understand where they're going. Most of the people who are doing the heavy lifting in the PNP world are either MVPs or some of them are actually Microsoft employees. So it's not like it's just some random person building stuff. Though random people build really good stuff sometimes, and it's often very useful. It's as close as possible as it can be to Microsoft, so that you're not going to get yourself into one of those problems, because we've all been there. We know that shouldn't happen.
Cool. The ongoing plug for PNP. Anything else to add to this, especially from the developer side, before we start talking about some starts and stops?
I think that the one major takeaway from what was and what is for development, and this sort of restating what I already said in the chat, is that the way customizations work now are not the farm-based or sandbox solutions of old. And so you need to rethink how you're architecting your solutions around the fact that code is going to be running client-side for the user. And definitely from an architectural point of view, you want to be making sure you're either using, even as a non-dev, you want to be making sure you're making selections for augmentation to your SharePoint environment that are as generic as possible, unless you have a very, very specific business use case that you're trying to address. And therefore, you're going to put an entire business process, ALM sort of, application lifestyle management type against that process. So you have somebody in charge of that process. You're documenting what you're building. You are keeping it up to date. You're maintaining it. So otherwise, you want to try to be picking as few augmentations as possible and being very selective that they're like Legos, right? You want to be able to configure them to be able to be used in a multiple different ways. So.
And Julie, that's a good segue to some of our starts and stops, because certainly one of the things in terms of starts, and I should probably put this into a tabular format to make it a little easier to read and compare, but SPFX, right? Learning to write extensions, or learning and understanding the SharePoint framework, I think is crucial to what you just described, correct?
Right. I mean, at least at a high level, even if you're not a dev, understanding at a high level, what are those customizations you can make? What are the things that you can do? Understanding that you do not want to manipulate the DOM anymore, which in layman's terms means that you don't want to be putting code onto the page that's reorganizing the structure of the page through code. That used to be something that we would do a lot in a classic environment. People would say, for branding was the most common, where somebody would say, I don't want the site to look like SharePoint, and we would jump through multiples of hoops to reorganize the page by literally using script to move things around on the page, script and styling, CSS. So that is not something you should be doing it, although you can do it, obviously. It's not something you should be doing anymore. You should be avoiding that at all costs, and you should definitely be understanding at least where the augmentation points are, that there's a header area that you can work in, that there's a footer area that you can work in, that you can build command sets and field customizers. And these are the ways that you should use, the building blocks you should use to extend your environment.
Okay. And going back to the out-of-the-box experience, I wanted to kind of make a couple of notes here about the first-party web parts, like the quick links web part, which has, I think somebody did all the permutations. They multiplied them all together, and it's like 80 different ways that web part could be configured on your screen. And I think I'm enough of a geek. I'm not as technical as most of you on this call, but I'm enough of a geek to have a favorite web part. And the featured content web part for modern sites is remarkable. And it's kind of, to some degree, it's the successor to the content editor web part, although it does very different things. It's kind of that, I won't say it's a Swiss Army knife, but it's really versatile, very usable. It's changed and evolved even since we first started seeing it and using it. Anything to add to these starts and stops?
Well, I think especially if you're not in SharePoint Online already, so if you're in Classic and you're in SharePoint Online, that's one set of challenges or opportunities. But if you're coming from SharePoint 2010 or 2013, or you're still back on prem and you're thinking maybe you're going to go to the cloud sometime, then just starting to build things with a cloud mentality or a SharePoint Online mentality is probably a very important thing to consider. It's not just once you get there you sort of change the way you do things. It's change the way you're doing things, knowing that that's your eventual path. And
Mark, the starts and stops here, these are fairly generic. Like I recall from doing a presentation like this with Dave Feldman about building your roadmap for SharePoint. Every organization's start, stop, continue might be different based on what your emphasis is on and types of solutions you're implementing, et cetera. So these are fairly generic. I did want to kind of call out workflows because we have it in here as a stop. I think there's more guidance headed our way on that. We could probably do a whole session on workflows, but is there anything in the stops that we want to talk about in more detail?
Well, I think even if you are on SharePoint Online and you're creating workflows, creating new SharePoint Designer workflows is probably not a great idea. Net new, right? If you've got existing workflows and you don't want to rebuild them, now may or may not be the time to do that, though it wouldn't be a bad idea. But building new things with Power Automate flows absolutely makes more sense because that's the platform going forward as opposed to the platform looking backward.
Mike, I'll also say on the branding front, we're not saying stop branding your SharePoint sites. We're saying stop doing the pixel perfect DOM manipulation. This looks like your external website level of branding and customization. There's a
master
lot.
pages.
Yep.
Stop
Custom master
pages.
Yeah, no master pages, no page layout. Stop doing that. Hard stop on that. Look at the lookbook, see what you can do with the modern pages, with the different backgrounds, colors, with the theme engines. Start exploring those different things so that you can have so that you can be much more supported moving forward.
Cool. Thanks. Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah. I don't want to jump in. Andrea asked in the chat, is there a way to surface where you have SharePoint Designer workflows as scan your tenancy? Yeah, there's a couple of ways to do that. So farther up in the chat, Andrea, I linked a tool where you could discover your classic pages. That's called the SharePoint Modernization Scanner. Let me say two things. Number one, that tool is crap. It is free and worth every penny you pay for it. So when you run it and you want to scream at your monitor, know that it is the tool. It is not you that is the problem. So that will, when you run that horrid piece of software, you can tell it to scan for pages like I suggested earlier, or you can tell it to just scan for workflows, and it will scan and tell you the workflows that you have that are the old workflows. If you have ShareGate, that can also run a report, and I forget exactly where it is in the UI, but there's a way you can do it and scan for workflows, and it gives you a thing. And also, if you're on-prem, SP.kit will give you a report for your on-prem workflows and tell you where they are.
And you can get SP.kit with an eval license, I believe, Todd, to do that, right?
Yeah. Go to syskit.com. If I wasn't hiding my background, you could see it in the thing behind me, but yeah, so there's a couple of different ways. But yeah, that tool from Microsoft is horrible. It finished maybe 10-20% of the time that I ran it. So when you run it, you can give it, you can say do the whole tenant or just do whatever. I would start small. It's atrocious.
The few times I've run it, it wasn't that bad, but I understand why you don't like it much. It also spits out a lot of different. It spits out a pile of Excel files, and each one has interesting information, but there's no sort of dashboard that says, do this or do that. It's a diagnostic tool more than anything else.
Yeah, and so anybody, Andrea or whoever, if you're curious about this, run that tool and then reach out to one of us, email, Twitter, whatever, and let us know what your experience was, what your report looked like. I would love to get more information about that because I've not had a pleasant experience with it, but I would love to see what your guys' experiences are.
Before we talk, thanks, Todd. Before we talk next steps, Emily, do you want to do the obligatory yelling at everybody about subsites, or we cover that in sufficient detail?
Yeah, please don't do them. One of the best benefits of hub sites is that you can change which hub sites you're associated to, and it won't impact your URL. So think about how much better your sites can withstand organizational change by adopting the site collection method and then using hubs to associate to them. On that note, I would also strongly strongly recommend stop mixing use on your sites and creating lots of permissions. You can have a separate team site where you're working on that content, and then you have a separate communication site where you're sharing that content out. It will really, really help with your governance and being able to see permissions easily. And I promise you, lots and lots of sites will not impact your day negatively. It will give you clearly defined buckets of work, just like you had a different notebook for each subject back in the days of school. This is kind of similar with what you're doing with your different site collections.
Emily, this might be a can do but shouldn't do, but you could have you could have that team site and the related comm site both be members of the same hub, correct?
You could, and I would argue that maybe that's more okay now with audience targeting coming in the navigation.
That's
and
right.
You could permission that team site so everyone else doesn't know that it's there part of the hub navigation, but anyone with that part of the team does.
Got it. That was the drawback in the past, but it looks like that's being solved by Microsoft.
Well, but do keep in mind that audience targeting is different than security, right?
Yep.
It's
Obfuscation. Yes.
It's actually meant to promote something to people as opposed to keep people from something.
Well, yeah, but I think the point of it in this case is if you can't get to it because you have been secured out of it, you don't want to show it to somebody on the menu. I think that's the thing that the audience targeting may solve, right? It's just that confusion of, hey, there's all these things on the menu. Why can't I get there? And calling
exactly
help desk,
right. But it's also a good point that that's not the same thing as security. If they knew how to get there, they could get there if they had perms.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
For sure.
All right,
then,
we're getting close to the
Shelley
top
had
of the hour.
one question about.
Yeah.
Well, no, Shelley just had a question about any suggestions about better practices to decoupling existing subsites. The only thing I know of, this is not my area, but the only thing I know about is that ShareGate has that that flattening tool. Which the only caveat I'm going to get you there is if you have a site with a subsite and the subsite has a linked list to the master sites list, it's going to copy that master sites list. So if it's huge, be cautious of that one. It bit me.
Yeah, you have to sort of think about with those subsites, what are they using from their parents in that hierarchy? And so, for instance, if you've got content types or you've got a lookup list that's in a different web or something like that, which you sort of
inherited permissions to,
then you end up with copies of things when you promote those subsites to be new modern sites. So I think in many cases it's better to think about, well, what in this subsite do we actually still want, and to migrate it into a new site as opposed to just lifting it up and trying to make it a modern site, because then you end up with a bit of a mess.
And I've seen most organizations make that switch where they decide, all right, anything new, we're going modern. And then when those older classic sites have a need, then they have modernized them, especially if you have a smaller team and you can't necessarily have a one-time larger team that helps in a bigger modernization effort.
All right, so we're at the top of the hour here. Just a couple of resources and takeaways that we've put together for you. I think there are some that we've added to this in the chat that we'll incorporate into this deck when we publish it. I guess the big ask, and I need to make sure I enunciate that well. The big ask is the next topic. So there's a lot inside of modernization that we could drill down into, and I'll ask the folks who are monitoring the chat: do we have any obvious candidates, or is this the right time to call for that?
I don't see anything obvious, but I'd love people to put just fill out our form on the Ask Sympraxis page from our website to just give us ideas around that. Like, what are the, because you're going to go away and think of things, right? So when you think of something, just pop over to that site, fill out the form, and just let us know what things you want us to focus on with regard to this topic or another topic, right?
Yep. What didn't we cover that matters to you? So we've got a couple of upcoming events. Derek and Emily both presenting at SharePoint Saturday Omaha. I know Philly's in the queue for July, but it hasn't been announced yet who's been accepted there as well. Anything else we need to cover before we wrap up for the week?
I don't think so.
Nope. Thank you for joining. Thanks especially to Bob, who unwittingly contributed content and joined us today, which is cool. So there's some timeless classics out there about modern SharePoint, as Mark said. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you on the next Ask Sympraxis, and have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.